welcome to the Happy Horse Podcast. If this is your first time with us, big welcome to you. And if you're a repeat listener, then massive welcome back to you. Today, we're doing something a little bit different. It's a Q&A episode, but I have with me a friend and colleague, Orla. So welcome, Orla, to your first Happy Horse Podcast.
Thank you, Nerida. Very excited to be here.
Orla brings a little bit of an international flavour. You'll notice that she has an Irish accent, and Orla and I have known each other since when, Orla? It was ages ago that we started working together.
9 years, pretty much to the day.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it is too. Yeah, it is too. Wow. So Orla worked for Pride's Easy Feed back in the day, and I consulted to Pride's Easy Feed for 20 years. And Orla was employed as a sales rep. And prior to that, you were at one of the big studs in the Hunter Valley. And I still remember the day that Peter Pride said to me, "Oh, you're going to love Orla." Anyway, we ended up out pasture sampling, I think, on the very, very first day that we met. And we've walked a lot of pastures together. I kid you not. I used to think Orla was short because we lost you, remember, in that pasture because there was so much grass that I couldn't see Orla. So I always had in my mind for some reason that you were short. And it wasn't that long ago I stood next to you and went, "Oh, you're the same height as me."
We're the same height.
Anyway, Orla, can you just give us, just for people listening, can you just give us like a couple of minute rundown on your background with horses and how you found yourself here with me on this episode?
Yeah, so my dad moved around a lot when we were a kid, and he brought me horse riding in Saudi Arabia, of all places, when I was 3. And that was it. I was hooked, loved it. And then as I was kind of going into uni, didn't really know what I wanted to do, was just here, there, everywhere. And Dad went, "Oh, there's a little university in Northern Ireland. You can ride horses every day and learn." And so I did that and got a equine science bachelor, which brought me to New Zealand, of all places. Went there and fell in love with the breeding side. I was doing the foalings there. Had a little stint in Australia and went, "Oh, this is even better." And then, I was in the Hunter Valley working on some stud farms in the foaling unit. So did that for a couple of years. Just started to get a bit tired. Long days, cold nights. And a job came up with Pride's, and I think, met you on pretty much day one. I remember going home after spending a day with you and just having the best sleep of my life because my brain, I was so tired. I was like, "What have I just done?"
Oh, so funny. I've got such distinct memories of that day. I remember the exact farm. I remember the exact paddocks. I remember it was hot and I had a shirt underneath my T-shirt, and I remember I took it off and it stayed in your car for I don't know how long until I caught up with you again. But yeah, it's funny how it's like so many days just blur into oblivion. But that day I just remember so distinctly.
Yeah.
Mm.
Oh God. Yeah. No. And and then nutrition just, I don't know. I think I regurgitate you every single day when I speak to someone. I'm like, "Yep, that's exactly how Nerida said it." And
You did get
exact same thing.
you did kind of get immersed in my world for a long time. Just
Between
talking
you and
nutrition
Peter.
yeah. So we did, gosh, so much work in the stud industry, but we sort of spanned across everything, like it's everything, every kind of horse I think I came across with work with Prides, and it was so good. And I think a big part of the reason you get such a good understanding when working with a feed company like that is because it does span across so many different horses. You know, that they had 40 something products and it kind of covered nearly everyone.
A feed for every need.
Yeah. Look at you go. Anyway,
I can't get rid of it.
As you can tell, we our time together is quite serious and boring. So sorry for that. We have spent an awful lot of times laughing about stuff, but yes. So I asked Orla. I did one Q&A session by myself, and it was boring. And if you listened to that episode and also found it boring, sorry about that. But it'll be much more interesting when I've got someone to ask me questions. So I actually don't know what's coming. I said to Orla, "Can you just pull together a few questions?" So yeah, it's thank you for sharing your background. I either didn't know or I'd forgotten about the Saudi riding. Yeah.
Well, it always made me, which is one of the questions, so I won't get into it, but I always remember you talking about your time in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, well, I never went there, but I worked with the King's farm for, oh gosh, must have been 10 years or more. And that was fascinating work because it's just so different, like, you know, in a hot desert. and can be cold in winter as well, and obviously no pasture. But yeah, I didn't know. That's cool. So anyway, rightio. Well, I'm ready. So if you're ready, let's go dive in with the first question.
Okay. So in one of your episodes, is the hay episode, you mentioned omeprazole. And then it made me think a lot about questions I used to get asked about people using omeprazole when they're traveling, going to certain events, when they know that hay is going to be taken away from them. I was more asking, is that a controversial thing? Is it a good thing? Yeah.
Mm, good question. And it is something that I have had people do over the years. So I like the concept, but I guess from a just want to say first, like omeprazole is obviously a veterinary drug, so this is not advice on using omeprazole from a veterinary perspective. So people absolutely must talk to their vet before they use omeprazole as a preventative for gastric ulcers. So omeprazole is one of the most commonly used drugs for people that are wondering what it is. It's one of the most commonly used drugs for blocking acid production in the stomach. You know all of this, Orla, but it blocks acid production in the stomach, and then when the stomach's not producing acid, it reduces the risk of the squamous gastric ulceration that can happen up in the top part of the stomach when horses are travelling, and their stomach is able to empty, but they still secrete acid, and then the acid will splash or squeeze up to the top part of the stomach. Well, I do talk a lot about the physiology of the horse's stomach in the first and second episode of the Happy Horse Nutrition podcast. So if you want a little bit more background on that, go and grab those 2 episodes and listen there. But I like this as a strategy because sometimes, like, no matter how well we manage horses, sometimes it's just impossible to stop their stomachs from emptying, and then they will get that acid splash. And as soon as they get any acid going up into the top part of their stomach, they will get some degree of acid burn, which, if left, will turn into ulcers. And really, one of the first horses that I ever suggested this strategy for was that gorgeous Aussie Jeremy Django, the black
Yeah.
Frisian.
Jeremy
So
Jandrick, yeah.
he was just the most beautiful horse. I loved that horse, and he had travelled from where he was sort of in the Upper Hunter to Melbourne. This is like a long, long time ago, so my memory's a bit hazy on it. But he'd travelled to Melbourne and back a few times, so huge distances, and he'd done it twice in a pretty short space of time, and then was off his feed, and his performance was terrible, and he just wasn't the same horse. And I remember working through the process of going, well, he's obviously ulcerated on that trip, and so from then on, we'd sort of recommended that they use omeprazole for a few days prior to travel because it just stops the acid production for the period of time. So if their stomachs do empty while they're traveling, then there's just not that acid in the stomach, or not as much acid in the stomach to cause the acid burn and the ulceration. It worked really well for him, and I've done it for lots of horses over the years. But there's lots of things to think about, lots of things that people should talk to their vet about. But the ideal situation is that you stop every 4 hours and let your horse fill their stomach back up and feed hay from the ground, so that also drains their lungs, because they can't drain their lungs any other way than getting their head down on the ground and clearing their lungs. So it's stopping and feeding them at ground level is good for so many reasons. But if you find you're in a situation where you have to travel a horse, or it goes on a transport, and you're not sure, they're not going to stop every 4 hours and give them feed, you can't travel horses with hay. I love to travel horses with hay, but not everyone does. So if you know your horse is going to be in a situation where it will be traveling for longer than 4 hours without anything to eat, then it is worth talking to your vet about using omeprazole so that you don't end up with ulcers by the time you get to where you're going, because they happen so fast. So fast.
Cool. So staying on that then, is it also, again, working with your vet for a horse when you're trying to get them because if you're putting them in I'm air quoting here, Jenny Craig paddock, and you're trying to reduce their feed and you're trying to get that recommended amount into them over that 24 hours, which can be hard. I'm thinking of my very, very fat quarter horse right now.
So
How is it?
We lost audio there just for a second. Did you say when you're trying to get them to lose weight?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
in air quotes, that Jenny Craig kind of lifestyle, right?
Yeah,
So you're
yeah.
giving them hay throughout the day, but you're only giving them small amounts. And yeah, that's come up a lot of giving them omeprazole during that time.
No.
No, thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't use it. So the thing you have to remember with the omeprazole the stomach knows that it's meant to be secreting acid because it's such an important part of the horse's physiology. So that acid is there to start protein breakdown. It's important for mineral digestion and absorption. It's important for so many reasons for food hygiene. So the horse, I mean, I say this so often, and I try to fit it in every podcast because it just blows my brain. And I love the fact that horses have evolved for 55 million years. It's not a mistake that they have acid in their stomach, right? The horses survival of the fittest or whatever drives evolution, like they have that acid there for a reason. And when we start blocking it long term, it causes problems. And one of the problems is that the stomach goes, when you give the horse omeprazole, the stomach goes, oh, there's something wrong with my acid production system here. For some reason, I don't have enough acid. I know what I'll do. I'll create more acid producing cells. That'll fix the problem. So it creates more acid producing cells. And then the omeprazole comes in and goes, not allowed to produce acid. So they got blocked. And then the stomach goes, still not enough acid producing cells. So it'll make more acid and it'll make more cells. So what happens over longer periods of time on omeprazole is that the stomach, and this happens in humans too, and it's well known to happen in humans, is that the stomach builds up all these acid secreting cells. And then when you stop treating with omeprazole, you get what they call hypersecretion. So you get massive production of acid because they've created all these extra acid producing cells and the omeprazole's not in there stopping them from producing acid anymore. So with the traveling scenario, I say yes, it's okay because it's such a short period of time. So the stomach's only got, a couple of days to create more of those acid producing cells. And when you take the omeprazole out of that system, it's not going to be an issue. The stomach will just go pretty much to normal and produce normal amounts of acid. But as you know, and as I know, because a couple of my horses are really, really, really good doers, so I'm constantly in this battle of controlling their weight. Weight loss is like a long-term thing. So if you've got if you're trying to manage gastric ulceration using omeprazole, which is it's a valid point, and I can understand why people would think about that because it's like, well, which is the lesser of two evils? Do I use omeprazole or not? But it's not the way to prevent gastric ulcers in horses that are trying to lose weight because you'll end up in that situation where they'll hypersecrete acid when you take them off it, which will put them at even higher risk of ulceration, and you're taking away their ability to digest protein, which in a horse that's losing weight, it's actually really, really important that they've got good protein digesting capability because we're usually feeding them really low quality forage, which doesn't have a lot of protein in it. So all we want to do is restrict their calorie intake so they lose weight, but we don't want to restrict any of their other nutrients. Orla's giggling at me here. I'm like, oh, how many times have we told people this over the years? But yeah, it's not easy to get a horse to lose weight.
Perfect. Well,
Can I give you an alternative
yeah,
to
go.
omeprazole? So what? Because
Yes.
it's such a valid point because their stomach secretes acid 24/7. So we have this situation where if we let that stomach empty, then that horse is at massively increased risk of getting squamous ulcers. So the ulcers in the top part of the stomach. But at the same time, we need to restrict calorie intake. And we end up in this thing of how do we restrict their feed or their calorie intake without restricting the bulk intake. So we still have to give them the bulk that they need to be able to chew, over a 24-hour period, not constantly, but for about 18 hours of that 24-hour period, ideally you'd want them chewing, but also restricting their calorie intake. And one of there's a couple of things that I absolutely love in the weight loss area, and that is tracks. So getting horses in tracks and getting them moving, because then you're increasing their energy burning. So you're using that instead of like calorie restriction. You're increasing their amount of calories they're using up, and they'll lose weight that way. And the other one is straw. Straw is just so useful for horses in weight loss situations because it's got the energy content of cardboard. It's like it's so lignified that it's got such low energy. So to give you a bit of perspective on energy, like straw will have an energy content somewhere around 6 megajoules. Like the unit and the number doesn't really matter, but like a prime lucerne hay would be around 12. So, where you could feed, if you'd get the same amount of energy out of 10 kilos of straw as you would out of 5 kilos of a good loosened hay. So all of a sudden you've got this situation where they can pretty much eat as much of it as they like. It'd be like when a human's on a diet. Yeah, you know what? Just you can eat as much lettuce as you like. Like if you want to chew on something, go and chew on that. You can chew on it all day, and it's not going to affect your weight loss journey. But the thing with straw, there's a couple of things you need to remember is that you need to make sure that the diet's balanced, and this is where the My Happy Horse nutrition app just comes into play, because if you feed a straw-based diet but you don't meet protein requirements, for example, then your horse doesn't have enough amino acids to create the mucus that then protects the stomach, and they'll end up with glandular ulceration, which you're trying to prevent one type of ulcers and you cause another, or they'll end up, if you don't put enough minerals in, they'll end up with a suppressed immune system, and then they'll start getting hoof abscesses and rain scald and all these niggly little annoying things that they can get when their immune system's a bit suppressed, or if they get sick, it'll take them ages to get over it, or they'll get complications that become quite serious. So it's so important to balance their diet when you're feeding like quite a lot of straw, and it's really important to balance their diet, like to really look in detail at their diet and make sure that you are actually meeting all their nutrient requirements. But I love straw for horses that need to lose weight, because it means that I'm pretty sure that horses can feel when their stomach gets acidic. So if so for your boy, like if you're trying to restrict his feed, if you're giving him like good hay at periods during the day, and then whenever he's going, oh, I really just want something to chew on because I need some saliva and I need some fiber in my gut, then he's got straw that he's not going to go and just, well, I don't know your horse, maybe you will, but there's very few horses that will just go and eat straw because it doesn't taste that great. Like it's a little bit like putting a bowl of broccoli on the kitchen bench and saying to your kids, like, if you get hungry, just go and graze on that. Like, there's a fair chance that they're not just going to go and, some kids maybe, but there's a fair chance that they're not just going to go and smash that bowl of broccoli. Whereas if you put, potato chips or anything that's much more moreish out there, then they'd smash it and it'd be gone. So it's the same, like good hay, horses will just eat it because it tastes really good, but the straw, they'll tend to pick at it and just chew on it when they're really wanting something to chew on.
Perfect. You did exactly what I thought you were going to do.
You know me well.
You're like a horse with a carrot. Just put the carrot just in front of you.
I know, we start on one little place and like, oh, but then you have to think about this and you have to think about this. Horse nutrition on one level is so simple. So it's, make sure they've got enough forage. Like that's, if you do that, if a horse has got enough forage, you're 90% of the way there with a horse. And, we see all these horses everywhere that just live on pasture. And they're relatively healthy. I mean, they're going to be pretty much in every country in the world copper and zinc deficient. Most countries are also going to be iodine and selenium deficient. So there's big deficiencies, and then depending on whether the pasture's green or dry brown, for extended periods of time, there'll be vitamin deficiencies creep in and stuff. But honestly, if they've got forage, it's 90% of the battle won. So enough forage, and then we just need to balance the diet up. Like it is really very simple on the. It really is very simple on the surface, but it gets so confusing because there's so many products that companies throw at people, and then we also end up in these situations where, well, if my horse is just eating forage all the time, it becomes the size of a whale. How do I restrict its calorie intake without creating a domino effect of all these other issues? So yes, we start in one place and we end up all over the place, and hopefully it helps.
Well, I think that kind of also leads into another thing. I just find that companies like make nutrition confusing. So you kind of rely on just dealing with them.
Mm-hmm.
Like you speak to so many people and they're like, oh, this person said that bad thing and this is bad and that's bad. And I'm like, ugh, hay is good. Hay, grass, fiber, it's good. Like if you're feeding lucerne and that's all you have, well, there's issues that, whatever, we're not going to get into that. But yeah, I feel like companies just need to care about the human side of it a little bit and stop trying to feed nonsense. But anyway, that's a whole other subject.
Yeah. It's been really interesting the last few weeks. We've had our heads sort of completely stuck in building more of the database for the Happy Horse nutrition app. And it has just reminded me how confusing products are. And there's the labeling on some of them is terrible, and it'll say, that my biggest bugbear is the ones that say grain free, and then you look on the ingredients list, and one of the first things is pollard or bran or meal mix or meal run, something that's completely grain derived. How do you that it's not grain free? Whole grain free maybe, but that's not. It becomes so confusing, and in that situation, it's also dangerous because horses, like horse owners, will think that it's safe for horses that can't have grain, not know how to read the ingredients list or not understand the ingredients list, and then it's dangerous for the horses. It frustrates me so much.
And one thing I find with that, because this was a massive red flag that I screamed from the rooftops, is say I've made a feed and it's grain free, it's laminitic safe, it's metabolic safe. The second ingredient is Orla's pellet. Then you actually go and look at what Orla's pellet is, and that's
Mm.
meal mix.
Mm-mm.
Oh,
Yeah, I know it is very frustrating, and and I guess this is a big part of what drives me to do what I do and to sit where I sit in the industry is that horse owners just need good information that's not being driven by selling them a product.
yep, absolutely. Right. Well, staying on that episode about hay, you were then talking about pasture sampling, and the importance of pasture sampling. And one thing that really just kept coming back was nitrates.
Mm.
Because it's raining here, it's very overcast, and I have a great memory of at a stud farm, their horses were colicking in the mornings on very overcast days, and you blew my mind about nitrates.
So it's an awesome question because it relates right back to the Saudi work that I did. So the way that I ended up involved with the King's Farm in Saudi Arabia was that they were seeing lots of laminitis in young racehorses, which is very unusual and not grain based, like not acidosis related laminitis. It was just laminitis they couldn't pin down to a cause. And they were seeing all these placenta changes in mares and just lots and lots of issues that they couldn't put their finger on. And it was a lovely Irish vet who was the farm manager, and he found me somehow, and I started working with them, and he'd already clued on to maybe it was the nitrates, because the thing with the Saudi Arabian hay is it's grown in the desert, so it's kind of like hydroponic hay because it's just been watered in sand, and they're all of the nutrients it was mostly rhodes grass. All of the nutrients that the rhodes grass needed was being supplied through fertilizer. And so if the farmers were mistiming their nitrogen application, they were getting these massive levels of nitrate in some of the hay. But the interesting thing was it didn't take the published levels, like the published toxic levels of nitrate, to start causing problems. So Frank and I went through and we went, okay, well, how about we set a limit of 500 parts per million of nitrate. So you got to be really careful when talking about nitrate, because some labs will report nitrate and other labs will report nitrate nitrogen. And the nitrate nitrogen is, I think you have times it by 4 something to calculate nitrate. So that's one thing when you're looking at analysis, just be really careful. Are you looking at nitrate or are you looking at nitrate nitrogen? All the numbers I'd talk about are all the nitrate itself. So we started rejecting any hay that was above 500 parts per million, which is low. In Australia, I say, and in Japan, I do a lot of work with big farms in Japan who are also importing most of their hay. We set a limit of 1,000 parts per million because it's not easy to get hay that's as low as 500. But yes, nitrate is extremely toxic to a horse's gut. So we did see a lot of colics, and I think we went through a couple of droughts together as well. And bringing hay in to feed broodmares, and it's not common to test hay. And if you get levels, and it was around 3,000 parts per million, if you're consistently feeding mares hay at 3,000 parts per million, you put them at massively increased risk of abortion. So it's with forage tests now, I mean, I love to know the energy and the protein level. I love to see the mineral content, but honestly, the two most important things for me on hay testing particularly is the nitrate content and its mold and yeast count, to see like where that's at. But yes, in pastures, I do also recommend always testing nitrate. But nitrate's a little bit like the non-structural carbohydrate in pastures. So for anyone who's been managing laminitic horses for a long time, you'll be aware that the sugar and starch content of a pasture will change day by day. The photosynthesis to drive it to allow it to make protein out of that nitrate. So ultimately, that's where it ends up as the protein. The plant uses it to make protein. But if you get windy weather, which increases the amount of water that a plant sucks up because it's pulling water out of the leaves, so it's just like evaporation essentially, and the plant will just suck a heap of water up out of the ground and the nitrate with it. So you get windy weather, and then if you get cloudy weather, so there's not enough sun to drive the photosynthesis that will then drive the protein production, it accumulates. So it can change a lot, and this would be why we were seeing those colics on a farm when we had like cloudy weather and possibly windy and cloudy weather at the same time, and spiking the nitrate levels. And I remember some of the nitrate levels that we tested in some of those pastures just made my skin crawl. Like they were just so high, like up in the multiple thousands, and causing problems. Yeah.
And that was actually after the drought broke the massive issues because everyone was making hay while the sun shone.
Well, and the thing with drought, and this is really relevant for people who I mean, it's rain in big parts of Australia where there has been drought for the last however long, like quite severe drought. But the thing with drought is there's soil obviously sitting there, massive amounts of nitrogen in our air. And that nitrogen, part of it will go into the soil, and then there's no plants using it. I don't understand this that cycle really well, but when a drought breaks, and particularly when you've got the tiny little plants that are bright green, but they don't have a lot of photosynthesis capacity, but they're madly sort of drawing nutrients up out of the soil, they're really high risk of nitrate accumulation. And I distinctly remember sort of late 2000s, so 2009, roughly from memory, there was a drought that broke in the Hunter, and we had studs that had mares that were actually getting ruptured stomachs.
Ow.
And I think I'm pretty sure that was a nitrate thing. It'll increase the risk of bloat in cattle. That's why, like, you ask people who are experienced with ruminants, like the cloudy, windy days are a much higher risk for bloat in ruminants than sunny days. And yeah, I think a lot of that has to do with nitrate. I don't understand that nearly as well because it's ruminant nutrition, but it's a really important one. Any race trainers, like, absolutely you should be testing nitrate in your hay. And it can be, if you are going along really well, getting good results with your horses, and then all of a sudden hit a flat patch and the horses are running terribly, it wouldn't surprise me if it was something like that in the hay, because their hay sources are changing all the time. And it's such a silent unknown because it's not widely tested for. If I was feeding horses hay consistently and that was their only source of forage, I would never buy hay without a nitrate test.
And so I know, again, you mentioned this in your hay episode, so everyone go back and listen to that. But if someone was going to go and test their hay, is it just one lab in Australia, worldwide? How do these?
There's lots of labs worldwide that will test it. So in the US, the Ecoanalytical or Dairy One forage lab definitely do nitrate testing. And here we've got quite a lot of labs that can do it. So it's a matter of asking. I'm going to forget the lab that I use off the top of my head. It'll come to me. I think it's Feed Test that do the nitrate analysis for us, but Feed Central can also have it done. So, and they will sometimes, with the Feed Central guys with their hay, they will sometimes report nitrate, and I'm hoping that sometime in the near future that it'll just be a standard test for them.
Cool. Well, can I do a side swing? Because you talked a lot about protein, talking about hay. And one source of protein that I love and that you love is soy. And soy is bashed. It's hated by so many people. Damn it. So maybe just explaining why it's hated and why we actually love it.
Yeah. It is hated, and we'll do we'll do this one, and then we might wrap up this episode after this, and we'll have to save other questions for
Okay.
other episodes, because you and I are going to get going and we just won't stop. But Yeah, soy's such an interesting ingredient. I love soybean, and it really is a beautiful protein source. But the thing that you and I both have in common is that we worked with a company that processed soy so beautifully and made it safe to feed. So the reason it's hated and gets bashed, it's actually a really good reason that soybean gets a hard time, and that's because there's so many different soybean products, and they're not all equal. So if you have an extruded, like properly extruded full fat soybean that's also tested to make sure that it's been heat treated properly, it's just the most wonderful protein source, natural protein source that you can get, plant protein. So if you go to whey protein, yes, that's nicer, but it's not a plant protein source. It's very expensive when we don't use it very much in horse feed. But as a plant protein source, it's beautiful. But the raw soybean has got all of these anti-nutritional factors. So it's got antitrypsin factor. So trypsin, I talk a lot about enzymes and enzymes being like little pairs of scissors. And trypsin is one of the main enzymes that cuts up protein. So it's a very protein specific enzyme, and the trypsin inhibitor that soybean has is essentially like a zippy tie or a piece of string that wraps itself around the end of that pair of scissors, and that pair of scissors cannot cut anything up anymore. So it becomes useless to the horse, and then the horse can't digest protein. I've only ever seen this once in my career, and it was horses that were in a riding stable. They were so beautifully cared for. And the lady was using Feed XL to balance all the diet. So, a nutrition tool so that she knew what was in the horse's diets, and she knew the horse's diets were balanced. And they got me to go in there and have a look at the horses because they were just in terrible condition. Their backs were like A-frames, and they like no muscle in their shoulders and on their rumps. And I'm looking, going, wow, this is really interesting. I looked at their diets, and I said to them, show me the soybean hulls that you're feeding. So there's soybean that's heat treated, and then there's all these other products that you can use off the soybean, and one of them is the soybean hulls. One of the soybean hull products that they were using was completely untreated. It was just raw. So it had like full activity of this trypsin inhibitor, and it was inhibiting protein digestion in these horses to such an extent that they were actually having to use up their own protein stores in their muscles to supply their protein requirements for things like, digestion and producing mucus in their gut, and doing all so many things that requires protein in metabolic processes and just keeping animals alive, that they were literally using their protein stores out of their muscle, and so they were losing all of their protein. And once we took them off the raw soybean hull product, their muscle came back, and we took I took that soybean hull and we tested it to see. There's a color indicator test that is very reliable, to see if it still had active trypsin inhibitor. And if there's no active trypsin inhibitor, you'll put the liquid on. You've seen this many times, Orla. You put the liquid on, and you get no color. And when there is active trypsin inhibitor, it lights up like a Christmas tree, like it goes bright pink, like my microphone. These pellets just went bright pink. They should never ever have been sold for horses because they were so I guess dangerous for them. They stopped them from digesting protein. And then soybeans also got like goitrogen, so they'll mess with the thyroid gland, and it's got they're an issue. So heat treatment will deactivate them and make it safe from that perspective as well. People tend to get a little bit upset about phytase, and they go, I'm sorry, phytate. They go, oh, soybean's so high in phytate. All phytate is a plant's natural form of phosphorus. So every grain, so lupins, which, we have so many lupins in Australia and the rest of the world. I can't believe we don't have lupins. You need to get lupins because they're just the most amazing ingredient. There's lots of different forms. Some of them are toxic, but the lupins that we use in horse feed, they're just amazing. They have phytate. Every grain and plant material contains phytate as its natural form of phosphorus. So yes, soybean does have a lot of phosphorus, so it has a lot of phytate, but horses digest phosphorus in their large intestine, so their microbes just chop up the phytate. It's not an issue for horses. I have in more recent years, and The Japanese horse industry is obsessed with soybean. Like it would blow your mind, Orla, to see what they do up there with soybean. Like some horses get 3 kilos of soybean meal a day. 3 kilos, like it's massive amount of soybean meal. Horses don't need that much soybean, and I spend a lot of time trying to convince them that they don't need that much soybean. But what I have been doing in the last 10 to 15 years is using phytase enzyme to break down phytates. So phytate is not an issue in terms of phosphorus for horses. They can get the phosphorus out, that's no worries. But phytate's like a magnet for other minerals. So it's negatively charged, and then all your positively charged minerals like calcium and copper and zinc and stuff, they get attracted to it. So it can reduce the digestion, and we know this in other animal species. We don't know it so much in horses, but phytase enzyme it's cheap, it's easy to add to feed, and I just think there's the physiology of the horse's gut says that phytate is probably having the same effect in there. So if I use an enzyme, but back to the original question, soybean comes in so many different forms, so you do have to be really, really aware of what you're buying. But if you can get a really high quality, really well processed soybean meal or full fat soybean, it's unbelievable for putting muscle, particularly on horses.
I'm picturing those horses in Japan on 3 kilos of soy, just walking around like those big solid bulls. It's like little bodybuilders.
Yeah. They love muscle on their racehorses, and they are very, very muscly on that much soybean. But you don't need that much. We'd be lucky to use sort of more than half a kilo in a horse here and still get as good an effect. But it's if you're feeding it in amongst other protein sources. So the cool thing I think to remember about protein is that protein's made up of about 20 different amino acids, and 10 of those a horse has to get in its diet, and the other 10, most of the time, it can make for itself. Sometimes if they're under stress or whatever, they also become what they call conditionally essential, so they also have to be in the diet. But every protein's different. So the protein you get from soybean is different to the protein you get from lupins or faba beans or rice bran or sunflowers. So they sort of fit together like a jigsaw puzzle. So sunflower meal, for example, it's a pretty poor source of essential amino acids because it's really low in lysine and threonine, but it's really rich in methionine. Whereas soybean is rich in pretty much every amino acid except methionine. So if you use those two together, then they work really nicely together. So yes, soybean's beautiful, but also bring in that ingredient variety so that you're getting this really nice jigsaw puzzle of amino acids, and then your horse is more likely to meet all of its amino acid requirements.
I think you need to do a whole episode just on proteins.
Yeah.
Sooner rather than later.
I could do it. I could do a whole week just on protein, but protein's amazing, and I so distinctly remember my first experience of taking thoroughbred brood mares from a low protein quality diet to a high protein quality diet, and I still say to people that you don't build muscle by sitting on the lounge and drinking whey protein shakes as a human. Like, you just don't. It'd be lovely if we did, but we just don't. You'll just put on weight and have as little muscle as you started. And I sort of always used to think the same probably applied to horses, and to some extent it does. If you feed a horse high quality protein and it's in work, it's going to build good muscle. But I didn't think the same would apply to brood mares. Anyway, I went out onto this farm as lactating brood mares, so massive protein requirements because they're putting so much protein into their milk all the time. And they were like the horses in the riding stable. They had just had these A-frame backs because they're mining their own reserves to make milk for their foals. And I thought, they're going to stay like that until the foals are weaned and they've got, some excess protein to sort of build up their own muscle reserve. But I also didn't know how much they would build up their own muscle reserve because they're not in work. I mean, they're wandering around, but they're not in work. Man, their top lines and rumps came back so fast, even while they were lactating, because we put them onto, it was a soybean that was the predominant protein source in their new diet. But I was amazed. I was like, wow, I didn't expect that. And I've seen it consistently now, so I know that it happens. But yeah, I really, really didn't expect them to be able to build muscle back so quickly or easily the way they did.
No, that's cool.
Anyway, we should stop. Otherwise we will.
Well, you've answered like 4 of my other questions. I'm like, tick, tick, tick,
Oh.
tick, tick.
We just keep going. This is what happens when you ask me questions like, well, there's this, but then you also need to think about this. But listen, if anyone is listening and does have questions, we would love you to send us questions. I mean, we can come up with questions about feeding horses all day long. I do also we've got our Dr. Nerida AI, and there's lots of questions in there that I'd actually love to pull out and answer on podcast with you, Orla. But if anyone is listening and does have a specific question, even if you want to give us your detailed background about your horse and say what should I feed, we're really happy to go into detail, because in helping you, we'd be helping other people. But you can send your questions to hello@myhappy.horse. We will get those and compile them, and then we'll also try and do our best to let you know when we've actually released the answer to your questions. Thank you so much for listening. Do go and check out the My Happy Horse Nutrition app, which is at myhappy.horse, and we will catch you next time. Thanks, Orla, too. That was awesome.
No, thank you. Later.
See you.
Bye.
If you'd like to know more about the My Happy Horse virtual equine nutritionist, you can head on over to myhappy.horse. And also, while you're there, check out the Dr. Nerida AI, which is me in AI format. And that version of me is happy to answer your questions about horse nutrition 24/7. Thanks again, and we'll catch you soon.